rank 1. So a discrete thing with only one step. And moreover, you get a bound for the cardinality of that progression, which is absolutely tight. It's exactly what you expect from looking at 10 simple examples. Okay. So that is Feynman's little theorem. That's in the spirit of the kind of theorem line. Measure on the line for the second. And so one can use these in the continuum as well. That's not a problem. Okay. Now, over the last couple of years, I've written a whole series of papers which apply Feynman's little theorem, the one about being close to optimality in one dimension, to various inequalities that are affine invariant, for which extremizers were known, and the theorems are characterized near extremizers. So these inequalities are Young's inequality for convolution, the Bernoulli-Minkowski inequality in arbitrary dimensions, more quantitative form. This was done by Fagali and Garrison using the same idea subsequently. And the Ricci-Sobolev inequality, which said that you can involve two functions in integrating into third, that's less than or equal to what happens if you symmetrize the three functions radially about the origin. Okay. But I have not found a way to apply this little theorem of Feynman to the Fourier transform. And so what I'm going to explain now is a method that uses the big theorem, the rather imprecise but very general one, in its place. Okay. And of course, symmetrization inequalities, the arrangement inequalities don't work well with the Fourier transform because cancellation is involved. It doesn't seem to work. Okay. So here's a statement for Young's convolution inequality. So if you take two sets, which have positive finite Lebesgue measures, and if the convolution is an indicator function, which is as large as possible up to a factor of delta, then those sets are connected to continuum multi-progressions, so there exists a continuum multi-progression whose measure is appropriately controlled. So the intersection of that progression with the set A has a reasonably large measure, proportional to the size of A itself, and the rank of the multi-progression is bounded above by a constant that depends only on delta. Okay. So what this gives you is it gives you the fact that a certain part of A has structure. Namely, roughly, it looks like one of these continuum multi-progressions. That's the kind of statement we want for quasi-extremizers. Okay. Now, I told you about Feynman's theorem. Feynman's theorem gives you control if you know a bound for the entire sum set. Here, you don't know a bound for the size of the entire sum set, but what you do know is if the sum set two sets is small, then many elements of a sum set can be represented as sums in many ways. Here, the assumption is essentially just the latter, that many elements of the sum set can be represented as sums in many ways. And there's another theorem of combinatorics which I'm suppressing, the Thalak-Semereti theorem, which bridges the gap between the hypothesis here and the hypothesis in Feynman's theorem, where you know that the entire sum set is controlled. So I'm going to omit that from this talk, but this is another bit of combinatorics that needs to be used here. Okay. So now we're going to need a couple general facts about operators. These have nothing to do with the Fourier transform. This is just something about bounded linear operators. So T is a bounded linear operator from LP to LQ, and suppose that you have a function f which is a near extremum for the inequality. Suppose you take that f and you split it into parts with differential parts. If C is a part which has a norm which is bounded below by a constant times the norm of f, then C need not be a near extremizer, but absolutely be a quasi-extremizer. So the norm of C is bounded below by the power of the quality theta times the norm of C. The principle here is if you have a team that's trying to achieve some goal, everybody in the team has to contribute. It's wasteful if part of the team contributes something. The second part says that the team has to work together towards a common goal. So if you decompose f as a sum of t and psi, and if both t and psi have norms that are bounded below by a constant times the norm of f, if you multiply t and t times t and psi and take LQ over 2 norm, as you should, then that again is bounded below in an appropriate level. So this says if you split the function in two, if they both have a reasonable size, then the two parts have to work together to make t of f large. Okay, so those are very reasonable things and they're very elementary to prove. Okay. Here is a preliminary statement about the structure of functions that nearly extremize the Hausdorff inequality. So we're given that f is a near extremizer. Norm of that is greater than or equal to 1 minus delta times the maximum possible. Where epsilon t greater than 0, and then if f is closing up to extremizing, then you can decompose f as before. So f is the sum of two parts of disjoint supports. Associated to this, there's one of these continuum multi-progressions. One part we don't know much about, but it has very small norm. Small as we want relative to the norm of f. And the other part is structure. So G is supported on this multi-progression, G satisfies an appropriate L infinity type bound, and the rank of the multi-progression is bounded above by some unit test only on epsilon. Suppose for a minute you had an actual extremizer. It's a Gaussian. I want to capture a Gaussian in one of these continuum multi-progressions. I can't do it. The best you can do is to take a very large ball, and then you capture almost all of the mass of the Gaussian, and a little bit is left out. So in that example, the unstructured part would be the part of the function near infinity, the progression would just be the ball, and G would be the part of the Gaussian that is inside the ball. Okay. But in general, the theorem doesn't give us that kind of picture. It also gives us a discrete part to the multi-progression, and the rank of that discrete part is controlled, but that's all we know about it. It could be extremely sparse. Okay, so the way you prove this is we know about quasi-extremizers. So you apply that lemma, and you split out as a part that has the structure and a part whose norm is slightly smaller than the norm of f. The part that's slightly smaller than the norm of f either has negligible norm or it has pretty big norm, in which case it's a quasi-extremizer. So you split it as another part that has structure plus something with a yet smaller norm. And you just do this over and over again until almost no norm is left. You get a sum with an enormous number of terms. Each one has its own continuum multi-progression. And that's not the statement here. My statement has only a single multi-progression, so there's an extra step missing. We prove that all those multi-progressions are in fact compatible, and their union is contained in a single multi-progression whose size and rank are still controlled. Okay. So that comes to the principle that all parts have to work together. Alright, so there's a number of steps here. Okay, so this part just says what I just said before. You just take a little bit at a time fine while you keep going. Okay. So this gets us to a decisive juncture. We now know that any near extremizer looks roughly, very roughly, like this picture. You have this continuum multi-progression, you have some sort of relativity bound, you have a little bit of norm left over. The main thing you don't know is that you could potentially have a discrete part, and this discrete part could potentially have rather high rank. So what we want to do is we want to replace this picture by a picture which looks more like this, single interval or convex set. And that is really the decisive step of the proof. Okay, so I haven't given any hint yet about how that is done. Okay, so before I explain to you that decisive step, I'm just going to skip ahead and tell you about the other steps of the proof that come after it. And then we'll go back to the main step. So the next thing that happens is a stroke of real good fortune. All the people in the audience who are specialists in partial differential equations know that when you prove a precompactness argument, there are essentially two things you need to rule out. You need to rule out mass going off to infinity, either by your function spreading out too much or by being translated. Okay, and that roughly is what I've done with this first part of the proof. Of course, it does in a sense go off to infinity, so I haven't really done it, but at least I've got some kind of geometric control. But you also need the same thing for the Fourier transform. And the methods I've explained are all really working with positive objects. They don't seem to apply very well to the Fourier transform. So this inequality is self-rule. If F is a near extremizer, then a power of F hat, this is F hat, that's outgoes out of F hat to the Q minus 2, that is also an extremizer. And therefore, anything I have successfully proved about all near extremizers F applies with powers to the Fourier transforms as well. So I now know for free that the Fourier transform of F also looks like this picture, although it could be a completely different looking continuum multi-progression, but at least there's a continuum multi-progression for F hat as well. Okay, so that's really good. And then there are a bunch of smaller steps. So remember, the decisive step says you can replace this picture by a single convex set. We have that for F, we have that for F hat. You have to prove that you're near the bounds of the limit provided by the uncertainty principle. So you need to prove that the product of the measures of the convex set for F and the convex set for F hat, the product is bounded above some constant. Then you prove they have compatible geometry. So you prove that one is contained in the polar of the other of the sum sideways. So not only do they look like convex sets, but they really look similar. And then by using the symmetries of the inequality, you can replace each of them by using John's theorem. You can replace each of them by ball, and you can make the balls every essentially comparable to one. Okay. So now we have a lot of control on the geometry. Now, as I said, even if you have a Gaussian, you may need to take a very large ball if you want to control almost all of the LP ones. So these two balls will be rather large. The product of the measure is bounded above by something that depends on how much of the mass you want to capture. Okay. And for the experts, there's a tiny hitch at the end. What you want to show the Fourier transform doesn't have mass near infinity. So you want to say that high frequencies contribute little to the LP norm of F. What this argument actually proves is that high frequencies contribute little to the LQ norm of F hat, and F of your inequality doesn't go backwards, so you can't control F. So it turns out that by a little bit of functional analysis, just using the strict uniform convexity uniform of LP, you can go backwards if you're dealing with near extreme voltage. So putting all this together proves the compactness theorem completely once one can do that decisive step, and the decisive step is to get rid of the discrete part. Okay, so that's what remains to be done. It all comes down to this. Okay, so here is a digression to the case of discrete groups. You can ask the same question about the Hausdorff-Young inequality for the integers or another discrete group. The optimal constant then is 1 for all exponents. It's a much simpler situation. Among the extremizers, our function is supported on a single point. In fact, those are the only extremizers. And the theorem characterizes near optimality. So if F is a near extremizer, then there exists a single point where nearly all the LP lives. Okay, so the near extremizers are supported on almost on single points. So this was first proved by Eisner and Tau, and independently of this later by Charlambides and myself, by somewhat different arguments. There's a paper of Fourier from the 1970s that comes rather close to proving this sort of thing, and Eisner and Tau used Fourier's method. Charlambides and I relied on the discrete form of the Brunner-Minkowski inequality, the lower bound for the measure of a subset. And so that was the main tool for us. So in any case, if you have a discrete group, the only way to nearly extremize is to be supported on a single point. Okay, so be nearly supported on a single point. So I want to emphasize this because this will be absolutely decisive in the proof. Okay. All right. We need a little bit of geometric fact. What we have so far is our function lives on one of these continuum multi-progressions with very high rank, arbitrarily high rank. I want to tame that a little bit, and here's a lemma which says that any multi-progression of controlled rank in Euclidean space actually looks in a certain sense like the integers. So we're given here, this is the torus, the quotient space. This norm is the distance from x to the nearest integer. You're given a progression P in Rd that has some controlled rank R, and its Lebesgue measure is 1. And you're given an arbitrarily small constant delta. And then you can map this progression by an affine automorphism so that the image lies within delta of the integers. And, of course, you can do that just by multiplying by a very small constant. But there's a constraint. The affine mapping is linear part as a Jacobian dependent, which is bounded below by an appropriate power of delta. Okay, so that prevents you from cheating too much and mapping everything close to the integers. Okay, so this is the form of this is maybe seems a little strange, but a typical example is if you have equally spaced intervals like this, where the lengths are epsilon, and the spacing is 1 over epsilon, and the spacing is square root epsilon, and the number then would be what? The number would be like epsilon to the minus a half. I guess I need epsilon to minus 1 of these. How about that? If you want to map this and you want to put each of these near the integers, you can't extend it too far because this interval expands into an interval. If you make it too big, it can't stay near the integers. There's a constraint that you don't collapse things too much. And in a case like this, it's pretty clear the optimal thing to do is to dilate by a factor of epsilon to the minus a half. So that converts the spacing to a unit spacing and puts you near the integers. So that's maybe the simplest example to bear in mind, but the lemma is completely different. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that z to the d is actually a good approximation. If you start off with possessing a very high rank, and you look at the very near integers, you will see microscopy. You'll see something whose rank has been reduced by the dimension, but you'll still see very much this multi-progression structure. Okay. So it's not it's a very weak kind of approximation. Okay. And when you do this, you destroy a natural normalization in the problem. You no longer have a lower bound on the measure of the image set. You might have to use something that's very large Jacobian determinant, as is clearly essential in this example. Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm going to skip over that slide. And so what we need to do now is to prove that if we have a near extremizer for Gauss-Young inequality, if it's supported very close to, say, the integers, then in fact it's supported very close to a single integer. And again, that's just a restatement of the somewhat simplified form of the decisive step. Okay, so we want to prove that we don't look like this, but that we look like just like one little part. Okay. And so the idea here, very much like Leib's analysis, is to play with the connection between the Fourier transform and different groups. So in particular, what I want to do is I want to regard, say we're in dimension 1, I want to regard the real line as being nearly isomorphic to the product group of the real line with the integers. Okay. So if you have a function that's supported very close to the integers, well, there's this mapping from the product space down to the real line, x comma n goes to x plus n. That's not an isomorphism. But if you work with x's that are very close to 0, then you don't see that it's not an isomorphism, and so you sum things together many, many, many times. So this is an example of a Fremont isomorphism of very high order. And it's in that sense that R cross C is going to be nearly isomorphic to R. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to exploit a Fourier transform version of this algebraic effect. Okay, and to do that, we need to use, actually, there are 5 Fourier transforms that come into this discussion. I've only listed 4 of them. So don't worry too much about the notation. There's a Fourier transform for RD, there's a Fourier transform for GD, there's a partial Fourier transform on the product space where you take the Fourier transform only with respect to the discrete coordinate, leaving the continuum coordinate alone, and there's a genuine Fourier transform on the product space. And all these are related in various ways. Okay, and now we're going to take our problem on R, let's say, and lift it up to the product space, R cross C, and it's best to think about this pictorially. So what you have is, at this juncture, if the dimension is 1, you have a function that's supported very near the integers. So it lives on a union of very short intervals like this. And what you should imagine is taking each of these intervals and rotating it so it's perpendicular to the blackboard and turning it into a whole number. So you get a picture with a bunch of parallel lines, and so you get a picture of the product of the integers with the real line. And what we do is we take that function on each interval and we just paste it onto this rotated interval in the most obvious way. So that's my lifting. Okay, so now I have a function on the product group, and a very simple lemma says if you start on R with a function which nearly extremizes the inequality, then the lifted function still nearly extremizes the inequality. Okay. This just uses the fact that the function has very small support, it's Fourier transform very, very slowly. What we've done is we've added an extra coordinate in the Fourier space that our function as a Fourier transform is almost independent of the new coordinate, and so we don't really change the much at all. Okay. Now you can get the Fourier transform in the product space by first taking the Fourier transform of one coordinate and then taking the Fourier transform with respect to the other. We do the discrete coordinate first, and we have to nearly extremize that inequality. So now, for each x, for each distance on the blackboard, the function on the integers in the transverse direction is a near extremizer for the discrete problem. And those have been characterized. So the conclusion is that my function is supported near a single element of this integer lattice. Okay. Now there I've cheated. The argument I showed you actually shows you that for each slice parallel to the blackboard, it's supported for the most part at a single point. I still have to prove that all those points match up and really give you a single point, and I'll leave that step out. That's not one of the deepest steps. Okay. All right, so this is just a heuristic justification that I already said, and that concludes the proof of the compactness theorem. Okay. So at this point, one knows that if you nearly extremize the inequality, you have to be close to a Gaussian. But because there's a compactness step, it's impossible to extract any sort of quantitative information from this proof. So now one wants to make it quantitative, and that's the last part. All right, well, all these things what you want to do is you want to take this function and you want to take a second-order Taylor expansion about an extremizer that is about a Gaussian. And there's immediately some bad news. There's a complication that comes not from the Fourier transform, but rather, embarrassingly, from the LP norm. That is not in any sense a close continuously differentiable function. Because Gaussians can be very small, you have to do a Taylor expansion about a point, the value is near 0, and the function t distance to p is not c2, p is less than 2. So there's actually a problem here. Okay, so here's a general lemma about this sort of thing. One has a bounded linear operator LP L2, any bounded linear operator. We have the assumption, though, that p is less than 2 and q is greater than 2. So that's special. Okay, suppose you have an extremizer, capital G. We're going to do a perturbation about that. So we're going to take that, we're going to add a small amount to it, and we're going to feed it into the ratio of poles. Okay, so the lemma says that for any perturbation, which is in a trivial sense transverse to the tangent space of the manifold of extremizers, that's all we need to look at. For any such perturbation, there's a splitting, so that that ratio behaves in the following way. You get the leading order term, the value at the point you're perturbing off of. You get the formal Hessian matrix of second derivatives, but evaluated only at a part of this function after you're perturbing by. And then you get a term which is unfortunately enormous, but fortunately has a favorable sign. It's controlled by the LP norm of the distance to the set of extremizers. That would completely beat out the quadratic bound I'm trying to prove. That this is a negative perturbation, so it makes the function smaller. It works in my favor. And then there's a very small quadratic bound. Okay, so this is a general lemma, which just has to do with the fact that the exponent t is less than 2 and q is greater than or equal to. So the upside is you can pretend your functional is quite continuously differentiable, even though it's not. And all that's left is to analyze this main term, the quadratic part of a formal Taylor expansion. Well, if you work this out, this becomes an eigenvalue problem for a specific self-adjoint compact linear operator on L2 of RD, and that operator is take a function, multiply by a certain Gaussian, combine with a second Gaussian, and multiply again by the first Gaussian. And this, with the right values of S and T, is what's known as the Naylor kernel, or the Naylor operator, and everything about it is known, so you get all those eigenvalues. It turns out that in dimension 1, if you're going to analyze the problem for real value functions in dimension 1, what you need is the fourth eigenvalue to be strictly less than a certain threshold. This has to do with the fact that the manifold Gaussian is real Gaussian is three-dimensional. So the fourth eigenvalue comes in naturally, and it turns out the third eigenvalue is equal to the threshold. The fourth eigenvalue is less, and so you get 0. Okay, so that's the end of the story. Thank you. Quite extremized. It gives you a constant of 1, not any of the functions strictly less than 1. So it actually beats the function. So what you're trying what you're trying to do is you would imagine taking an example and cutting it off. That would make a competitor. And the question is, how well can you do by cutting it off? And the theorem says, no matter how you cut it, you cannot come close to streamline inequality. That's one corollary. Right. So roughly, the way you should think about that is you take this infinite sum of Dirac masses, think of that as progression rank 1, multiply it by a Gaussian, you're now really introducing, in some sense, a second, you're making something of rank 2. That's the way to think of it. And of course, rank 2 is not optimal. So that's why nothing like that works, essentially, because it's a rank 2 construction.
Thank you, Stefan and Evan, for inviting me to this meeting. So I'll be talking about the risk further towards the target projection. This is doing work with Camilo Develis and my supervisor, Dr. Petikidi. And so I guess we've seen this equation before, since this is a mini workshop on Euler. So this is the Euler equation, incremental Euler equation, and so it's quite easy to see that for a solution we have this simple calculation, multiply the equation by square root of v, get this formal combination of kinetic energy. Now, in turbulence theory, a distinctive feature of turbulent flow is that you expect these solutions to dissipate energy. And at least for when we look at weak solutions for Euler, we're not looking at straight solutions, but rather we test these functions as a test function. It's known for quite some time that these solutions don't necessarily conserve energy. And so I guess the first result in that direction was by Scheffer, led by Schneerman, and they both presented flows which have contact support in time, which GT describes as nightmare solutions. His analogy is that when you go to bed, you put some water in your glass and you put it next to your bed table, and it's still, and then you fall asleep, you wake up in the middle of the night, and it starts oscillating wildly, and then you go back to bed and you wake up and it's still. So it's like a nightmare that this sort of thing typically happens when you send this nightmare solution. Of course, this solution is not typical. You don't expect water, which is steady at rest, to just start oscillating violently and then go straight again. But anyway, you do expect turbulent flows to dissipate energy, so that's something you do expect. So the conjecture we're interested in was first proposed by Blas and Sager, and specifically he conjectured criteria for, his original paper wasn't written in this deep solution formalization, but he actually looked at the period coefficients and he wrote sort of decay properties in the period coefficients, but in the end it ends up being something like this. So he conjectured that any solutions which belong to a Hawley space, the Hawley exponent greater than the third, conserve energy, and that there exist weak solutions for any Hawley exponent less than the third, which do not conserve energy. Now, the first part of this conjecture is fully resolved. So it was first considered by Ing, and then later proved by Constantine Petikidi, and they actually proved a stronger result. Namely, they proved that solutions belong to specific vector space, where you can see that the regularity is greater than the third, just has the same regularity as the target conjecture. That weak solutions belong to this space conserve energy. And so I might just give a proof because it shows one question is where does this 1/3 come from? So the proof is very simple. So the original paper was about 3 pages, I think. So what we do, for simplicity, we'll assume that this solution to Euler has some differentiability of time. This is not critical, and I'll explain where this metric function comes in, how to remove